please help us continue to offer this valuable program by completing your evaluations and turning them in to the conference table outside. It's in your packet somewhere. Now let's put everything we've learned into perspective for today. What's it all mean and what's next? Let's welcome back to the stage Kevin Dugan, Heidi Mondarelli-Frank, and we have a substitution. Sean Williams is coming in to help us out. Yeah.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah.
Pardon me, I don't know how to put my phone away. There we go.
Sean, you want to give a little background for the folks who might not know you?
Sure, I'm Sean Williams. I run Communication Ammo, and my clients include Western Reserve Academy and Kristen Young. And also, I teach here at Penn State in the PR sequence. This time, the measurement and ROI class in the online program. Wow.
Well, I'll throw out a few questions and then we'll open it up to the audience. I'd like for each panelist to share 2 or 3 takeaways from today's conference, and that's what lessons are important for the audience members to know about social media and visualization in their communications plans. Heidi, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I think...
Microphone.
Sorry. All right. Yeah, I mean, I think one thing is, just as communicators, our job has always been to be storytellers, and I think social media kind of really drives that home even more, and I think we all have a role in kind of coming together. I think the whole idea of that silos breaking down, you really can't tell a good story visually if you don't have various parties working together. So you need that. I think the PR team or whoever's leading that messaging is very important, and there are a lot of ways to be visual. One is just purely through photos, but they're also in the kind of stories that you tell and the way in which you do that. And I think you really need a multifaceted team to really bring that to life.
I'll go. Number one, I think, is that all social media and all communication has to be part of a plan. The strategy is everything. One of the things that I say to my students is objectives are everything. So if you don't understand where it is you're trying to get from the very start, especially when it comes to all the multifarious tools that are available to us to make things happen in social, then you're going to wind up having a better than average chance of stumbling with what you do. So first is get the strategy right, make sure you have a plan and understand your objectives. And then the second thing that I'd mentioned is the role of data. And the data in planning is critical. You know, we say there's a continuum in the measurement world that starts with research and goes through measurement during and then evaluation after whatever campaign, program, or plan you've enacted. And all 3 of those things, research, measurement, and evaluation, are critical, including in the social space. That doesn't necessarily mean you got to go all the way to ROI, as one of our panelists said, which is a financial term that requires a financial result. But it does mean that you have to have a really solid grasp on what the data tell you from start to finish in your plan.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, both observations, and I think Measure now maybe even has an additional optimize. You know, I think that when you guys were talking about your case with I just remember naked, but I'm not your core target. But that said, I remember you had talked about you've got that flexibility where you can, you know, learn from the feedback and everything. And it really makes me wish I took stats in college, I'll tell you that, because it is getting a lot more left-brained in a good way. And I do think it's a mix of art and science. The only other thing I would say on top of all that is, if I had to sum it up in a visual, it would be the keep calm and carry on sign. Because, you know, we're here saying, well, it's got to be part of a big plan, but it's changing every day. And you got to do this, and you got to do this, and you got to do this. So it's almost kind of diametrically opposed. And just, you know, deep inhale, you know, take a breath, and just think about it in the big picture. And it always goes back to the audience at the end of the day. I mean, I think that's sort of the North Star for the plan. And the plan is the bedrock foundation that you need to go back to. But it's very easy to get caught up into the real time and the shiny stuff. But just always keep that bigger picture in mind.
And feel free to jump in any time if you want to follow up a point someone's made or ask a follow-up question. From your experience, what impact does visualization have on behavior or attitude changes?
All right, well, two comments on visualization and how it changes people. We are primarily, at least in North America, primarily a visual culture. And yet most of us who are in public relations exist in the world of words. And I think this is changing over time. But visualization, operates at a different level as we saw today. I mean, sometimes it's simplicity. It helps us better understand. In other ways, visualization tells our story in a different way that interacts with our brains in a different way. So if objective setting is about what do you want people to think, feel, or do as a result of whatever it is you're doing, then the words are in the think. It's the intellectual sort of angle. And the words are also in the do, which is the call to action, right? The visualization's in the feel. Even if you use emotive language, the addition of some sort of visualization that acts on your emotions is likely to bring about perhaps a better result than otherwise. So that's kind of the 2 cents. I think it acts emotionally, even when it's data visualization. I think people have a better relationship with the visual emotionally than they do the numbers themselves, especially as PR people who really don't get math,
I know when I look at Facebook Insights, I like the part where you actually just see the pretty charts and everything. And our data guys like to export everything to Excel. I'm like, why would you do that? I don't understand, but they find more stuff in there. But I do think the other thing about visualization too is, I saw some statistic once that Mashable put out, how they measure this, I don't really know, but like 85% of what the brain processes is visual, and that's what you're most likely to retain. And I don't really know how they substantiated that, but somebody apparently did. So there is that piece that you want to be noticed. We talked about, or I mentioned earlier how I always hear brands talk about, well, you have to jump into space because there's everybody's on Facebook and there's all this YouTube video out there and everyone, there's just stuff everywhere, so that's where our audience is. But our job again is to make you figure how do I get my brand or my company through all of that? And so visualization, I think, forces us to tell a compelling story in a much tighter space. As PR people, as I'm probably doing right now, we often want to drone on and write a news release that's long, and this really helps us. I think social media forces us to be much more concise, and whether that's through a combination of words and pictures together, but it's telling that story much more impactfully, much more quickly than I am doing right now.
Yeah, and I think building on that, when we talk a lot about storytelling, and I'm trying to remember the name of the book, but there was a book that I read on the elements of persuasion. When they talk about storytelling, they say that a story is a fact wrapped in an emotion. Okay, so I had my McDonald's stat up there, and then I showed you the picture of the McDonald's, which as you noted earlier, it's got that sort of that emotional feel to it. It's sort of a 1-2 punch, because if you've just got the stats, you could be in a room with somebody. We were talking earlier that somebody was providing analytics to their boss, making a recommendation, and they just wouldn't have it, even though the analytics clearly supported what they wanted to do. So people can refute the numbers if they don't like them or for whatever reason. And if it's just an emotional argument, that at the same time can be pretty easily dismissed depending on the situation. But if you've got them both, it's a great combination and it's a strong story. So I feel like with data visualization in particular, it makes storytelling with that data extremely easy because it brings that fact and emotion to the forefront. So it's a definite opportunity.
We've been all over this one today, but if there's one more point to make about how can visual content influence the brand experience?
Well, I talked about earlier about, thinking about all 5 senses. And I know I used to work at an interior design and architectural firm, and so as a result, I know that some brands, including like Walmart, have their own carpet that sort of ties back to the logo a little bit, and others might have wallpaper, and it doesn't look like a photo op, you know, when you've got the seamless behind you with all the logos, so it gets on TV. It's not that bad, but I do think that visual is a big part of any experience, and you know, when it comes to offline brand experiences, it's extremely important. I mean, it's that instant context, you know. I mean, if you're trying to take somebody in a certain direction, you know, there's studies that talk about different colors to use. There's your brand colors. It helps establish that context and establish expectations right away. So, you know, offline and online, I think it's extremely important.
Yeah, I mean, I think visualization, it's a way to bring your brand to life. You know, you can't take, one of the things we talk about a lot too is like, you can't take obviously a TV spot and put it on a billboard. There are a lot of different ways that you tell your story. You can't take a billboard and, well, maybe you can take a billboard and turn it into a print ad, but there's different nuances to each of those platforms. And I think we have to think about how do you really bring your brand to life through social media, and that happens in so many different ways. It's how you speak to your consumer, but also you can tell, I think, again, going back to visualization, that imagery helps tell that story much faster, and it's part of that brand experience. If your brand is all the experiences someone has with your organization, it's you know, how your customer service team interacts, it's how the store looks, it's how, you know, your advertising looks, and I think social media touches on a lot of those different things and a lot of those different aspects of branding, and I think, yeah, that it just helps bring that story to life.
Ditto. That's right. The one thing I do is differentiate a little bit from the sort of marketing angle and look more at, you call it PR, you can call it the more general corporate communication angle, and that is, if in marketing we talk about making sure that all of our various brand touch points are aligned and support one another in order to reach the conclusion through the marketing funnel and all that, if we kind of flip that around and talk instead about the corporate communication side of things, then we're talking about attitude and reputation as being legitimate outcomes. Visualization helps align all of our messaging. It's part of how people experience our organization, whether it's a brand or whether it's a nonprofit or whether it's, you know, a for-profit company. So you know, the visualization itself, if you think of organizations that talk a good game, but the collar doesn't match the cuffs, shall we say, that they don't really, their visual imagery doesn't really support who they are, then that affects how it is we perceive the company. And so I think there's an alignment that needs to take place, and visualization is a big part of that.
Sticking with that, the visual imagery and the feelings and the emotion it brings forth, how do you measure that in a campaign, or how do you go about measuring, maybe even before the campaign starts?
Well, I think I mean, going back to the three, I think in a perfect world, in an ideal world, which is of course where we are, we would have no trouble convincing people to pay us to do research beforehand, evaluation during, evaluation at the end, and measurement during. The fact is that we have to have proxies for those things. And so one thing we can do is we can do content analysis, which isn't as difficult as it sounds. We can look at what people are saying about our organization and use that as a proxy for how they feel about us. We can do focus groups or depth interviews in an ethnographic sort of sense. So we're not trying to extrapolate all of that qualitative data across the entire universe of potential customers or people who adhere to our brand, but we are at least getting some sort of clue as to what it is they think and feel about us. And then we've got, you know, sales data or donation data or some other means of financial outcome data in many cases that we can bring to bear as well. So I think the measurement is pretty traditional. It starts with research, and whether that research is using quantitative means like surveying people, or whether it's more qualitative. The point is, getting back to the main theme, that data needs to drive much of our planning and much of our strategy. It isn't our impulse that leads us to these conclusions and selection of these tactics. Instead, it's the data that we're able to glean by examining people.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I would add one layer on that too. And there's the overall measurement of the outcomes. Did we get the business leads? Did we drive awareness? Whatever those things that we are trying to drive from a business and marketing standpoint. But I think one of the coolest things too about day-to-day in terms of execution is you get that immediate feedback as to whether something is working and telling the story, and you can adjust. You could see how much a photo was shared, or how many people liked something, or retweeted something, or whatever the case might be. So you could see right away, and you could see the comments that are going along, and so you get these feelings right away, and this actual proof through data right away as to if that story is being told right. And that's, to me, one of the most exciting things. And the other thing I would add to that too, I know Shel Holtz talked about was the cars.com example, and I agree that's completely poor. It was not necessarily the best creative I've ever seen. However, that also doesn't take much money to do, and I think we could, as long as you're not experimenting with really crass stuff like cranberry scones, I think we can experiment a little bit and see what works without spending a lot of money. As long as we're using some common sense.
Yeah, I'll confess, I forget what the question was, but just going down this rabbit hole, I do think that people need to think more about test and learn and the opportunity that provides. You're setting the expectation that it's a small, controlled test, and so the expectations are set that you're not betting the whole farm on this, that you want to learn and see what happens from it. You really need to do that. Just the way things change so quickly. Who was talking about Snapchat earlier? But you've got to download it, and then you quickly see, you have to take some of that time. And I think that we come from a totally different realm where, well, first of all, traditionally up until social media, it was always broadcast, right? And now it's engagement. So you see people trying to do broadcast strategies on an engagement platform, and it sucks, right? It's painful. And then from there, you can just tell when folks are taking the wrong approach to that platform and not tapping into it for what it does best. I think also earlier you had talked about making that offline and online connection, and I think social is critical. And I used to say that social media is a circuit, and until you use it to create this offline connection, the circuit's really not complete. And that's another thing I think brands tend to do is just consider it to be an online world, when if you're thinking about online and offline holistically, they can really feed off of each other, with events that then drive social content. But again, the brand in of itself is used to being very uniform, singular, anonymous. There's one way to do it. There are brand standards for very good reasons. And then when you get onto social media, it's like, well, yeah, but we need to personify the brand. So we need to get away from that. We need to have individuals with personalities that indirectly reinforce the brand. And it's a hard connection at times for folks to get, and so you see some poor executions as a result. And like I said, I know I didn't even touch the question that you had.
I forget what it was.
Okay.
Okay, last question for me. We've heard several speakers talk about the folly of predicting the future of social media, but anybody have any insight on what you might be doing for your clients in social media a year from now or 3 years from now? I heard a yes.
Right, yeah. Exactly, yes. Ditto.
Yeah, actually, I hesitate to put a timestamp on it, because I think actually I got asked the same question last year, and I'm going to give the same answer, and that's the use of social tools inside the enterprise. I have a client right now that has a fairly sophisticated intranet capability. They do community home spaces, so they break their 150,000 employees down into individual groups by practice area, and they share information pretty widely, but they're still mainly from top down. What is happening, like even as we speak, is employees are beginning to employ social tools, whether it's something like Twitter or whether it's separate Facebook pages, setting up separate communities on the intranet. They're using social tools, sharing content, rating content, apart from what corporate communications is doing. one of the things I've been asked to do is try to look at how it is we can contribute to that trend rather than try to take it over.
You know, one of the trends is at South by Southwest this year, and one of the trends that you know, people were talking about is sort of the evolution of the screen, and the screen is going to be everywhere. And you know, there's the iWatch that is supposed to be coming out, and there are interactive screens that you see. I mean, if you look at actually what the Cleveland Museum of Art has done with their new gallery, is just outstanding and wonderful, and we're so fortunate to have that in Northeast Ohio. But that bringing social experiences and connecting with either traditional experiences, I think is going to be something that we'll continue to see people doing. I think, you know, what we see a lot of, not just on the sort of PR side of social, but on the paid media side too, is that there's so much more convergence between buying media on television and buying digital media that coincides. If they've targeted me as a consumer who's watching, you know, The Walking Dead on Sunday night, they know a lot about me and what I might be watching at that time. There's going to be certain kinds of ads that are going to be served up to me because I'm probably, because this whole phenomenon of people watching television with their cell phone in their hand and talking at the same time is just continuing to grow. So I think you'll see more brands, you know, kind of converging on how they're creating their programs and their communications.
I live 4 hours away, so I'm going to go out on a limb. So next year, if you guys look back and say, well, what did they say last year? I'll be long gone. But I do think that there's a big potential for disruption. And one of the things I think is with data that's starting to already be done by companies like Bluefin and Networked Insights is not just measuring social for social's sake, but taking, you know, there's all this data, big data, small data, medium data, but it's all usually used in a very concentrated area. Social's used to measure social activity. That makes perfect sense. Well, you get other insights out of it, which everybody was talking about throughout the day. That's very smart. But Empower is a media buying and planning and buying agency. And you know, the opportunities that we're looking forward to is taking that social data out of the social realm and applying it into a media planning and buying realm to see what additional insights we can figure out. Because I tell everybody, we spend like $750,000 on slow data, which are essentially databases that are updated, you know, maybe once a month or once a quarter, but still not like fast data, which gets down to your client's sales information every day at the receipts at the counter, if they're a retailer, social, search, web analytics, that's all considered fast data. But taking those out of their respective homes and applying them in new and different ways, I think will be disruptive as it relates to some of the insights. This is the one that when I said I live 4 hours away, but I'm going to go for it. 3D printing. This is way off. It's still fringe and everything, and there's issues around being able to print guns and everything. But 3D printing is very real. I mean, they're printing ears and putting them on as prosthetics on people. So, but think about that. You know, when it gets to a point where you're home, you're making dinner or about to make dinner, and you realize you need a new spatula, and all you need to do is go online to Target and download the plan and print it, and you've got your spatula right there. It is going to get to that point, and I know it sounds, you know, 2001 Space Odyssey, but that is something that is going to be extremely disruptive in the sense that, well, how's Target making money off of that plan, right? So I think that's another one. I'll throw one more in there for fun, but I am a firm believer, unfortunately, that because of sites like Facebook where you spend all this time and effort and sweat equity as an individual, but it's their site, right? I mean, you're essentially what's being sold. Your data is being sold to advertisers, but people feel like Facebook owes them something for all their time. And there's that self-entitlement that you get when you're using these free sites, which I get it. I see why that happens, but there's this, with Facebook in particular, because Facebook is bad about it, and some of it's probably calculated, but privacy, okay? We tend to freak out around privacy, and there's other things going on, like I said, where you can let brands play with your data, and then you get a nice infographic. That's kind of at impact here, but basically what I'm trying to get at is I fear that everybody nobody wants to take accountability for their own data, their own privacy to a certain degree. Like they want to blame Facebook. Facebook needs to figure this out. Google needs to figure this out. I'm, still convinced. I watched way too much Monty Python, but I'm convinced I click so many user service agreements without reading them that I'm going to give I sign up for live organ donation at some point without even knowing. And they're going to come into the room and get my spleen. So I'm just as much to blame, but I fear that people aren't going to start taking accountability for that until something unfortunate and extremely tragic happens because of it. And I don't know if that's going to be a year from now. I hope not, but I do see that as a something out there that's just kind of waiting to happen before people start to do that. There's startups that are coming out that are helping you monetize that data and control it. And if brands have such value and covet that data so much, you might as well at least decide who gets to see it and who doesn't. But even then, I mean, that's still laying that monetization layer on it. I still don't feel like people are going to be thinking about it in the terms that they should. Like, do I understand what's going to happen here? Am I okay with that? It's a lot of work.
Okay, no, thanks. Questions from the audience? Yes.
It seems to me that there's a developing war between PR and marketing in terms of whose social media is big, and both of them think that it falls within both jurisdictions. Now, Marcus Thomas, I know, has a great way of incorporating all these different elements. There's still PR, there's still marketing. It seems like everybody is communicating, but they still have their own separate rules, as opposed to other companies where they've said, well, we're not going to have marketing and PR. They're going to be the same thing from now on. What are your thoughts on which approach is really more beneficial?
I actually don't see it being a war as I see more convergence happening. And I also think there's differences between corporate communications, and of course depends on company size, and then the marketing folks who are using social media more for marketing. So there potentially could be more, there could potentially be more challenges, I guess, if you're looking at the corporate standpoint. But from a marketing point of view, someone who's been in public relations business and in more of a marketing communications agency for a number of years, I think that the whole evolution of social media has actually helped us become so much more integrated with all of the marketing efforts, and it just keeps getting stronger and better every year. So I actually don't see it so much as a war, but I think there's sort of that forcing of the disciplines come together to build the program and to build the plan.
Yeah, I agree. Another of my mantras is that all marketing is communication, but not all communication is marketing. And some of my integrated marketing communications folks will say that, well, wait a minute, are you talking about not integrating? Not at all. I think, the first step to diffusing any potential war over who, quote, owns social media is, what's the objective of social media? Are you attempting to, actually sell product there? Are you attempting to build relationships? Are you attempting to, take the next 2 years to build enough relationships to sell product? It really depends on what your objective is. Ideally, what would happen between PR and marketing is you'd start with better communication between the two departments, speaking in the corporate sense, that there'd get more communication going. Then get a bit more cooperation. So you may be having a campaign of some sort, but you actually cooperate on who's going to do what and who's going to be responsible for what. And then you collaborate on it. So you actually share, you go beyond sharing information and go straight into actually developing your plans and your campaigns in this integrated fashion. And that's the path that you have to take to get to integration. You've got to start with communication, then comes cooperation, and finally collaboration, and then you're ready to integrate. It's kind of like trying to jump right straight from awareness to action. You need understanding. You have to generate some sort of commitment before you can get to action. Otherwise, if you short-circuit it, it doesn't work. So I think a lot of the war, and from a guy whose company name is Communication Ammo, I'm saying this, but the war, if there's any sort of war, is actually, in self-definition. A lot of us in PR don't think of ourselves as marketers. And a lot of people in corporate communication, internal communication, certainly don't see themselves as part of a marketing team. Even in organizations where marketing, the chief marketing officer is the one running the whole show. So I think it's more of, it's a little bit of navel gazing on our part, to try and figure out who really owns it. The hell with who owns it. Let's just get the work done.
real quick. It was just one thing too, just as an example, like if I think about, so say we work with a lot of different Nestle brands. In the world of Nestle, the brand team, the marketing team owns like that Nesquik Facebook page. But if there's an issue, a crisis, let's say there's a recall on the product, you know, we're working very closely with, even though the marketing team owns that page in that community, consumer services is there jumping right in, the corporate communications team, and all those plans, all those individuals are working in sync. So just another quick example, and I see that happen on a lot of different brands of how it really forces people, because I think organizations recognize that it's not owned by one specific department, but that it's, you know, it's really, it touches so many groups, but you see people working together.
Yeah, I talked about earlier, and this is actually out of South by 2 years ago, the concept of collaboration versus competition, and that's even outside of companies and with competitors. And you know, down in Cincinnati, we're doing a little bit more of that with the startup community, for example, because we realize if we all kind of get together and are consistent about it, there's a bigger opportunity for our market versus just one of our companies, where if we're kind of, you know, staging ourselves based on, or positioning ourselves based on what the competitor's doing, it's never going to happen. I think that I totally get why who owns it, you know, comes up. I just wrote a post as it relates to content marketing for the same reasons, because I'm waiting for, you know, to go to a pitch and our secretary be in there as a competitor. It's like everybody and their grandmother is seemingly now trying to stake a claim. And at the end of the day, the audience owns it, right? I mean, if you're focused on the audience, it'll happen. But again, collaboration versus competition and convergence with an integrated approach, you know, if that's all working, you guys are going to do more together than you do apart, no matter who owns it. You know, Shell had talked about earlier, you know, I'd said something to the extent of, more than ever, we have to have an appreciation and a understanding to a degree of paid as it relates to what we do. And I'm not saying, because as Shell mentioned, you can't do it all. I totally agree. But at the same time, you need to know enough to know when you bring those folks in so they can do what they do best, and you achieve that bigger success than you would have just on your own. And I think that's important. And again, it just gets back to collaborate versus compete. And if you talk all the time about who owns it, somebody's going to take it right out from under you.
Another question? It can be something practical. There's a lot of high-priced talent down here that if you have something in your organization you want to know about. Okay. Well, thanks a lot. Yes. I want to thank our panelists again and all the speakers today for being with us and spending their whole day here. I've got two quick announcements. One, there will be a student wrap-up session immediately following this one. And I think Chris Sledzik said the best way to handle it is the students who are interested can meet out in the lobby with him, and we can see what goes from there. The other thing is I'd like to invite all of you on behalf of the Young Professionals Group of the Akron Area PRSA for a post-conference social at Ray's, where I think they have adult beverages. Directions available to pick up in the lobby. And next April, we hope to see you at the 7th Annual YouToo Conference. And thanks for coming. Be sure to do the evaluation sheets and have a good weekend.